The wind in Wyoming did not simply blow. It clawed across the empty land like it meant to peel the skin from bone. It rattled telegraph wires into a lonely song and shoved dust along the wooden platform where Elias Thorne stood waiting for a woman he had never met and a life he did not know how to live. He was 26 years old, tall and wide in the shoulders from hauling timber and breaking wild calves, yet he held his hat in both hands like a shield. His fingers were rough and scarred, the kind that could raise a barn in a week, but they shook as he stared down the long stretch of iron rails cutting through the prairie. Behind him, the town of Blackwood crouched low against the sky. Crooked false front buildings leaned into the wind. Two men sat on the porch of the general store, boots hooked over the railing, and watching him with open amusement. Jeb Carter was one of them, thick-necked and loud, a man who had made sport of Elias since boyhood. Elias did not turn around. He knew what they were thinking. Poor Elias. Too soft to court a girl proper. Had to buy one from a catalog. He swallowed and kept his eyes on the horizon. He had not ordered a bride because he wanted one. He had done it because the silence in his half-built cabin felt louder every night. Because a man alone on the frontier faded into a ghost long before he was buried. And because walking into the brothel at the edge of town made his stomach twist in shame he could not name. Ink and paper felt safer than courage. A low rumble vibrated through the planks beneath his boots. Smoke smeared the far edge of the land. The train was coming. Elias wiped his palms on his trousers and fought the urge to run. The locomotive thundered in and screeched to a stop, steam rolling across the platform in choking white clouds. Passengers poured out, homesteaders, salesmen, miners with hollow eyes. Then she stepped down from the second car. She carried a small, battered trunk in one hand and a worn Bible in the other. Her gray wool dress was patched neat at the hem. Her bonnet hid her face until she lifted her chin to scan the crowd. Clara Vance was not soft. She was thin and sharp-edged, skin pale like it had not seen sun in years. Wheat-colored hair was pulled tight beneath the bonnet, but it was her eyes that froze Elias in place. Blue, flat, watchful. They swept the platform the way a hunted animal watched tree lines. Then they landed on him, and she walked toward him without hurry, stopping 3 feet away. "Miss Vance," Elias said, and hated how his voice cracked. "Yes, I am Elias Thorne." "Clara." No warmth sat in that word. He reached for her trunk. She flinched. Her hand snapped out and caught his wrist for 1 second before she yanked back, clutching her own chest. "I can manage my things." Heat flooded his face. "I only meant to help." She studied him. Really studied him. Like she expected anger to follow. It did not. Only panic. Confusion flickered across her face. She nodded once. "Very well." The trunk was heartbreakingly light. They walked through town in silence while heads turned and whispers followed. A churchwoman sniffed loud as they passed. Jeb called out from the saloon porch. "Package arrive in one piece, Eli." Elias froze. Just before he could speak, Clara stopped and turned. She did not glare. She only looked at Jeb with bored, empty eyes, the kind that said she had heard worse. Jeb shifted, suddenly unsure, and retreated inside. Clara faced forward again. "Is the wagon far?" "Just here." The ride to the homestead took 2 hours through empty land and gathering storm clouds. Clara sat straight-backed, eyes scanning gullies and ridges. "It is open," she said quietly. "Yes. Good place to hide." He glanced at her. "Hide." She tightened her grip on the Bible. I meant quiet. The cabin sat alone near a creek, half sod and half timber, smoke rising thin from the chimney. It is not much, Elias said fast. South wall still needs boards. Kitchen floor is dirt. Bedroom has planks, though. Bedroom. She stared at the house. It has a lock. Yes, a oak bar. Good. Inside was clean and spare. Stove, table, 2 chairs, 1 door leading to the only bedroom. They ate stew in silence while coyotes howled in the distance. When the bowls were empty, the quiet thickened. Elias cleared his throat. You will want to rest. Yes. She opened the bedroom door and stared at the single bed with 2 pillows. Then she turned. Mr. Thorne, we should speak of arrangements. Arrangements. The marriage. She began unbuttoning her cuffs with calm hands. I cook. I clean. I mend. And at night. Her eyes locked on his. I need to know. Can you make me come? The words hit him like a fist. She stepped closer, not seductive. Assessing. If you cannot, will you expect me to pretend? Or will you take what you are owed? Elias stared at the floor. I do not know how. Silence crashed down. I am a virgin. He waited for laughter. It did not come. Her shoulders dropped. She exhaled a shaking breath. You have never. No. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, the frost was gone. That is good, she whispered. That means we can wait. He nodded too fast. I will not force you. They agreed to share the bed, only to fool the town. That night, they lay stiff as boards on opposite sides of the quilt. In the dark, Clara remembered the man at the train station, the one in the long coat who watched her board the wagon and then turned toward the telegraph office. Morning brought work. Days passed. They hauled water together, fixed fences, laughed at a stubborn mule until both were breathless. She mended his shirts. She treated his burned hand with snow and cloth. Something careful and fragile grew between them. One night by the fire, she asked why he was so gentle. He told her about his father, about watching his mother shrink, about cattle towns and men who took. I decided I would rather be mocked than feared. She told him about St. Louis, about debt, about being 16 and trapped, about men who paid and called it lawful. I came here to be real again. You are real, he said. 2 nights later, in the dark, she asked him to touch her hand. To stop when she said stop. She cried when it did not hurt. Winter closed in, then spring. They rode into town for supplies. The storekeeper whispered, Cyrus Conincade is here. A rich cattle baron stepped inside. His eyes landed on Clara. Mr. Dalton speaks highly of you. Clara went white. When he brushed her shoulder, but she slammed fabric shears into the counter inches from his hand. I am not property. Elias twisted a gunman's wrist and dragged her out. They ran to a half-drunk lawyer named Holt. He wants your creek, Holt said, and your wife is his lever. That night, someone cut their fence, killed their cow, painted a message on the barn, pay the debt or lose the land. Clara tried to flee into the snow. Elias dragged her back, half-frozen. I need you, he sobbed. Morning came hard and cold. We go to Cheyenne, Elias said. Federal court. They packed light and rode south into the mountains. On the 3rd day, riders appeared behind them. Clara clutched his arm. They are coming. Elias looked back through the blowing snow. Yes, he said, and this is only the beginning. The mountains did not welcome them. Snow lay in deep, hard drifts that cut the trail down to a narrow ribbon of ice and stone. The wind screamed through the passes and stole the breath from their lungs. Elias walked most of the way, leading the mare by the reins, breaking trail with his legs until they burned and shook. Clara stayed in the saddle, wrapped tight in blankets, her hands white around the pommel. They slept in abandoned line shacks and shallow rock shelters, never lighting a fire. Each night, they listened for hoofbeats. Each morning, Elias studied the ground, reading tracks like a book written in fear. On the third day, he saw dust moving wrong against the snow. "Riders," he said quietly. 4 shapes crested a ridge far behind them, riding fast and straight. "They found us," Clara whispered. Elias did not answer. He turned the mare into a narrow cut in the land where stone walls pressed close. They hid among boulders while the riders thundered past below, too fast and too sure to see what they missed. Clara held her breath until the sound faded. That night, they huddled together without speaking. Fear pressed in on all sides, but something else lived there too: resolve. By the 5th day, the land opened. Rails appeared. Smoke rose. Cheyenne spread out before them like a different world made of brick and noise and iron, and they rode in looking like ghosts. Their horse limped. Their faces were raw with wind. Their clothes were stiff with dirt and ice. But they had made it. The federal courthouse loomed heavy and gray, built to remind small people how small they were. Clerks blocked their way. Questions piled up. Time slipped. Finally, a young assistant attorney named Black granted them a few minutes. "This territory is full of land disputes," he said flatly. "Why is yours special?" Clara stepped forward. "It is about slavery," she said, "and land theft." She told him everything. She did not soften it. She did not beg. By the end, Black leaned forward, jaw tight. "A hearing tomorrow," he said. "Judge Abernathy." The courtroom filled early. Reporters packed the benches. Cyrus Conincade sat smug in the back, his lawyer polished and cruel. And they put Clara on the stand. They stripped her story bare and tried to turn it against her. They called her immoral, a liar, a thief. Clara sat rigid, hands clenched, hearing old lies spoken with new confidence. Then they called Elias. He stood in the center of the room and told the truth. He told them he had never touched a woman before Clara. The room froze. "I married her because I was lonely," he said. "She did not trap me. She saved me." He pointed at Conincade. "That man tried to steal my land by stealing my wife." Judge Abernathy slammed his gavel. "The contract is void. The injunction stands. Case closed." For one breath, hope filled the room. Then Black caught them in the hall. "Do not celebrate. Paper burns." They left Cheyenne at once. 2 days out, the riders came again. They hid. They pushed. And they reached the valley at dawn. Men were already on their land. Corrals rising, cattle moving, guns visible. Cyrus Conincade sat on Elias's porch like he owned it. "He ignored the order," Clara said. Elias checked his rifle. Then a wagon wheels creaked behind them. Thaddeus Holt rolled up coughing and smiling, followed by townsfolk carrying fear and shotguns. "A marshal is coming," Holt said. 2 days. They rode down together. Words flew. Guns followed. Shots cracked the morning open. Holt stood waving the injunction. A bullet cut him down. Something inside Elias went still. He walked through gunfire. Sheriff Grady stepped aside. Elias reached the porch. He disarmed Conincade and pressed him into the boards. "No," Elias said when Clara screamed for blood. "I choose to protect." The train whistle cut the air. Federal marshals crested the ridge. It was over. Spring came slow. They buried Holt under a cottonwood. Connecade went to prison. The trafficking ring broke apart. The land healed. One evening, Clara asked, "Do you think danger will come again?" "Yes," Elias said, "but not alone." They sat together watching the sun sink, two broken people who stood their ground. And this time, the land did not take them. It held them. Spring did not arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like it was unsure whether it was welcome. Snow pulled back from the edges of the creek first, revealing dark, moving water. Then, small green shoots pushed through blackened ground where the hay shed had burned. The land looked wounded, but alive. Elias and Clara rebuilt one board at a time. They worked without hurry, but without fear pushing them forward anymore. Neighbors came in small numbers at first, awkward and unsure. Henderson brought flour and nails. Smith showed up with lumber cut square and true. No one apologized out loud, but they stayed longer than needed and worked harder than required. The silence that once crushed Elias now felt full. One morning, Clara stood by the creek washing clothes. The water was cold and fast, but she smiled as she worked. Elias watched her from the bank, leaning on his shovel. He realized something then that stopped him cold. She moved like someone who expected to live, not to survive, to live. That night, they sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets while frogs called from the reeds. The sky was wide and full of stars. "Elias," Clara said softly, do you ever think about who we were when we met?" "All the time," he answered. "I thought you were weak." He smiled. "I was." She shook her head. "No, you were untrained. There is a difference." He looked at her then, really looked at her. The sharp edges were still there, but they were not armor anymore. They were just part of her shape. "I was afraid," she continued. "I thought strength meant control, that the one who hurt less won. And now," he asked, "now I know strength is choosing not to hurt when you could." They sat quietly. That night, when they went to bed, there was no line between sides of the mattress anymore, no careful space measured by fear. Elias kissed her slowly, checking her breath, her hands, the way her body answered. When she guided him, he followed. When she stopped him, he stopped. Or there was no taking, only giving, only listening. Later, wrapped together, Clara rested her head on his chest and listened to his heartbeat. "I stayed," she whispered. "I did not disappear." "You never will," he said. "Not here." Summer came with heat and dust and long days. The new barn rose stronger than the old one. The creek ran steady. Elias planted more than he ever had before, trusting the land to answer. The town changed too. People spoke Elias's name differently now. Not softly, not with laughter. With respect. The churchwomen still kept their distance, but no one turned their back on Clara anymore. Children waved. Men tipped their hats. Jeb Carter crossed the street when he saw them coming. One afternoon, a stranger rode in from the south. He stopped at the fence line and called out politely, "I'm looking for Elias Thorne." Elias stepped forward, hand loose at his side, calm. "Yes." The man removed his hat. "I rode with the marshals. They said to tell you this land is clear. No claims, no shadows left." Clara felt something loosen inside her that she had not known was still tight. Clear. That night, she slept without dreams for the first time in years. Autumn painted the valley gold. They harvested together, laughing when the mule refused to cooperate, and cursing together when the wind took more than it gave. The land tested them, but it no longer threatened them. One evening, Elias came inside carrying a small carved box. "I made something," he said, suddenly shy. Inside lay a simple ring, shaped from hammered silver, imperfect and strong. "I know we already said the words," he said, "but I wanted you to have something chosen, not assigned." Clara closed the box slowly. "No one has ever chosen me," she said. "I do," he answered. They married again that night in front of the fire. No witnesses, no papers, just truth. Winter returned, but it was different now. The cold stayed outside the walls. Inside was warmth and work and shared silence. One night, as snow fell thick and quiet, Clara asked him a question. "Elias, if we had met any other way, do you think we would have found each other?" He thought for a long time. "No," he said honestly. "We needed to be broken first. Otherwise, we would not have known how to be gentle." She nodded. Outside, the wind pressed against the cabin and failed to enter. Years later, travelers passing through the valley would speak of a homestead by the creek where a quiet man and a sharp-eyed woman built something rare. Not just a farm, not just a marriage, a place where power meant protection, where healing came from being seen, where two people who had been treated like less chose to become more together. And in the wide, unforgiving West, that was its own kind of miracle.